William Billy Thornton stood on the wraparound porch of his Victorian home, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of amber and gold. At 42, he had built an empire from nothing, a construction company that had grown from a single truck to a fleet of hundreds, employing half the town of Millbrook. His calloused hands, scarred from years of manual labor before success found him, gripped the coffee mug tighter as he spotted the familiar silver Mercedes pulling into his driveway. Dr. Cassandra Cassie Hartwell stepped out, her auburn hair catching the morning light. At 36, she was everything a successful man's wife should be: beautiful, educated, and charming. She worked as a pediatric surgeon at the county hospital, and their marriage had been the talk of the town 8 years ago. The perfect power couple, everyone said, but Billy knew better. He'd known for 3 months now. "Morning, darling," Cassie called out, her smile as practiced as her surgical precision. "Early meeting with the hospital board today. Might be late tonight." Billy nodded, his steel-gray eyes revealing nothing. "Of course, I'll be working late myself. New subdivision needs my attention," he replied. He watched her kiss his cheek, the same cheek she'd kissed before going to meet her lover, Dr. Trevor Blackstone, the hospital's head of cardiology. Billy had discovered their affair by accident. A private investigator he'd hired to look into a rival construction company had mixed up the files, delivering evidence of his wife's betrayal instead. The photos were crystal clear. Cassie and Trevor, in passionate embraces at the Riverside Motel, the same motel Billy had stayed in 20 years ago when he first came to Millbrook with nothing but a dream and a determination to succeed. What made it worse was the conversation he'd overheard 2 weeks ago. Cassie and Trevor weren't just having an affair. They were planning his demise. The insurance money, they'd whispered, would set them up for life. $2 million was a lot of money, even for a successful doctor and surgeon. But they didn't know Billy's real history. They didn't know about the 15 years he'd spent in Detroit before coming to Millbrook, working for people who taught him that loyalty was everything, and betrayal meant danger. They didn't know about the skills he'd learned in those dark alleys and abandoned warehouses. They thought he was just a small-town contractor who'd gotten lucky. They were wrong. Billy's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus Rodriguez, his foreman and the only person he trusted completely. Marcus had been with him since the beginning, a former Marine who understood that some wars never ended. Package delivered. She took the bait. Billy smiled, a cold expression that would have made his old adversaries from Detroit proud. The game was about to begin. Dr. Trevor Blackstone adjusted his tie in the mirror of his downtown office. At 45, he was considered one of the most eligible bachelors in Millbrook. Despite his growing relationship with Cassie, he'd never married, preferring the freedom to pursue what he wanted, when he wanted it. And what he wanted now was Cassie Thornton and her husband's fortune. Trevor had a secret that would destroy his career if it ever came to light. 5 years ago, he'd been involved in a medical malpractice case that had been quietly settled. A patient had died under his care due to his negligence. He'd been drinking before a surgery, and his trembling hands had nicked an artery. The family had been paid handsomely to keep quiet, but Trevor knew that if Billy Thornton ever discovered this, he could lose everything. What Trevor didn't know was that Billy had found out 2 months ago. That evening, as Trevor prepared to meet Cassie at their usual rendezvous, his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. "Dr. Blackstone," he answered. "You don't know me, but I know you," a gravelly voice said. I have something that belongs to you, something you thought was buried deep. Trevor's blood ran cold. Who is this? Someone who knows about Amy Peterson. Remember her? 23 years old, mother of 2, died on your operating table because you couldn't keep the bottle away. The line went dead. Trevor's hands shook as he stared at the phone. Someone knew. Someone had found out about Amy Peterson. Meanwhile, across town, Cassie was dealing with her own mysterious caller. Mrs. Thornton, you might want to be more careful about who you trust, a woman's voice said when Cassie answered her phone. Who is this? Cassie asked. Someone who knows your husband better than you do. He's not the man you think he is. Meet me at the old Millbrook Cemetery at midnight if you want to know the truth about Billy Thornton. Cassie hung up, her heart racing. She thought about calling Trevor, but something told her to go alone. She needed to know what this was about. At midnight, Cassie drove to the cemetery, her headlights cutting through the darkness. She found a woman waiting by the old oak tree near the entrance, a woman with short blonde hair and tired eyes. You're brave to come alone, the woman said. I'm Linda Morrison. I used to work for your husband 15 years ago in Detroit. Cassie frowned. Billy never mentioned working in Detroit. That's because he wasn't doing construction there, Linda said. He was working for the Torino family. Muscle work, debt collection, punishment details. Your husband has blood on his hands, Mrs. Thornton. A lot of blood. Cassie's world tilted. That's impossible. Billy's a simple contractor. Nothing simple about Billy Thornton, Linda continued. He left Detroit after a job went bad. Changed his name, started over. But men like him never really change. They just get better at hiding what they are. Linda handed Cassie a manila envelope. Photos, documents, proof of what your husband really is. The question is, what are you going to do about it? As Cassie drove home, her mind raced. The envelope sat on the passenger seat like a loaded gun. She thought about Trevor, about their plans, about the life insurance policy. Maybe they were doing the right thing after all. Maybe Billy Thornton deserved what was coming to him. What she didn't know was that Linda Morrison had been dead for 3 years, and the woman she'd met was actually Maria Santos, an actress Billy had hired to play the part perfectly. 3 weeks later, Billy sat in his study, going over the final details of his plan. Tonight was the night everything would come together. His parents, Eleanor and Frank Thornton, had arrived that morning for their monthly visit. At 75 and 78, respectively, they were the only family Billy had left, and they adored Cassie. She's such a wonderful girl, his mother had said over dinner. You're lucky to have found her. Billy had smiled and agreed, knowing that by tomorrow, everything would be different. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Cassie and Trevor thought they were the masterminds, but they were merely pawns in Billy's game. He had discovered their plan to stage a house fire, kill him and his parents, and claim the insurance money. What they didn't know was that Billy had been feeding them information, guiding them toward this exact scenario. At 11:47 p.m., as Billy lay in bed pretending to sleep, he heard the subtle sounds of movement downstairs. Cassie was executing their plan, but with a twist she hadn't anticipated. The fire she was setting wouldn't spread as expected. Billy had spent weeks fireproofing certain areas of the house, creating safe zones where he and his parents could wait out the flames. The smoke detectors had been disabled, just as Cassie had planned, but Billy had installed hidden backup systems that would alert the fire department at exactly the right moment, not too early to save the house, but early enough to save lives and preserve evidence. As the fire began to spread through the ground floor, Billy moved quickly. He had drugged his parents' evening tea with a mild sedative, not enough to harm them, but enough to keep them calm and compliant. He gathered them from their room and led them to the reinforced safe room he had built behind his study, a room Cassie didn't know existed. "What's happening?" his father asked, groggy. "Just stay calm, Dad. Everything's going to be okay," Billy said, helping them into the hidden room. "There's oxygen in here, and the fire department will be here soon. I'll be right back." Billy returned to his bedroom and activated the hidden cameras he'd installed throughout the house. Every angle was covered. Every moment was being recorded. He watched as Cassie moved through the house, spreading accelerant and setting fires. She was thorough. He'd give her that. But she was also sloppy. She left fingerprints on the gasoline can and didn't notice the tiny cameras recording her every move. When she reached the basement, Billy's trap was sprung. The electrical panel she was sabotaging wasn't connected to the main power. It was a decoy. The real electrical system was safely isolated. As she tried to cut the wires to make it look like an electrical fire, the cameras captured everything. The fire department arrived exactly when Billy had planned, finding him unconscious in his bedroom. The paramedics rushed him outside, where he played the part of the shocked husband perfectly. "My parents," he screamed, fighting against the paramedics. "They're still inside. And Cassie, where's Cassie?" But Cassie was already gone, having escaped through the back of the house. Within an hour, she was on television, tears streaming down her face as she spoke to a CNN reporter who had happened to be in town covering a different story. "He cut the fire alarm wires," she sobbed. "Billy must have done it. He wanted the life insurance money. He's been acting strange lately, talking about money problems. I never thought he'd hurt his own parents." Billy watched from his hospital bed, where he was being treated for minor smoke inhalation. The performance was perfect. Cassie had just sealed her own fate. The arrest came at dawn. Billy was still in the hospital when Detective Ray Morrison and his partner, Detective Janet Cole, walked into his room with handcuffs. "William Thornton, you're under arrest for the murder of Eleanor and Frank Thornton and the attempted murder of your wife, Cassandra Thornton," Detective Morrison said, reading him his rights. Billy didn't resist. He'd expected this. It was all part of the plan. "This is insane," he said, playing his part perfectly. "My wife is the one who—" "Save it for your lawyer," Detective Cole interrupted. "We have evidence that you disabled the smoke detectors and cut the fire alarm wires. Your wife barely escaped with her life." As they led him away, Billy caught sight of Cassie in the hospital corridor, still playing the grieving wife. She was good. He'd give her that, but not good enough. Billy's lawyer, Theodore Ted Grayson, met him at the county jail. At 62, Ted was an old-school defense attorney who had handled some of the biggest cases in the state. He was also one of the few people who knew about Billy's past in Detroit. "They're charging you with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder," Ted said, settling into his chair across from Billy in the visitor's room. "The evidence looks bad, Billy. Really bad." "How bad?" Billy asked. "They found accelerant residue on your clothes. The fire marshal determined the fire was deliberately set." "And your wife?" Ted paused. "Your wife is very convincing on television. Half the country thinks you're a monster." Billy smiled, the same cold smile he'd worn on his porch that morning 3 weeks ago. "Ted, I need you to do something for me. I need you to hire a private investigator. Someone discreet. Someone who can dig deep." "Billy, we don't have time for—" "We have all the time in the world," Billy interrupted. Trust me on this. I want you to investigate Cassie's background. I want you to find out everything about her life before she came to Millbrook. And I want you to look into Dr. Trevor Blackstone. Ted frowned. Trevor Blackstone, the cardiac surgeon? What does he have to do with this? Everything, Billy said. Just trust me, Ted. I'll fix everything. The next 3 months were hell. Billy sat in a county jail cell, watching as his wife played the grieving widow on every news channel. She was everywhere. Oprah, Ellen, CNN, Fox News. The story had everything. A wealthy contractor, a beautiful doctor wife, elderly parents killed in a fire, and accusations of murder for insurance money. The media painted Billy as a monster, a man so greedy that he'd murder his own parents for money. Cassie was the victim, the brave woman who'd escaped the killer's trap. But Billy wasn't worried. He spent his time in jail reading, exercising, and planning. He'd faced worse odds in Detroit. He knew that patience was a virtue, and revenge was a dish best served cold. Meanwhile, Ted Grayson was working. The private investigator he'd hired, a former FBI agent named Patricia Wells, had discovered something interesting about Cassie's past. She's not from Oregon like she claimed, Patricia reported to Ted. She's from a small town in Montana called Clearwater. And her name isn't Cassandra Hartwell. It's Cassandra Mitchell. Mitchell? Ted frowned. Why would she change her name? That's where it gets interesting, Patricia continued. Cassandra Mitchell was married before, twice. Both husbands died in suspicious circumstances. House fires, both of them. Ted felt his blood run cold. Are you telling me? I'm telling you that your client might be married to a serial killer, Patricia said. And I'm just getting started. Patricia Wells spread the files across Ted Grayson's desk like a hand of cards. Each file represented a dead husband, a destroyed life, and a pattern that was becoming horrifyingly clear. Husband number 1, Robert Mitchell, age 34, died in a house fire in Clearwater, Montana, 6 years ago, Patricia began. Officially ruled accidental, but the insurance investigator had questions. Robert's life insurance policy was for $500,000, and he'd increased it just 2 months before his death. Ted studied the photographs. Robert Mitchell had been a handsome man, a successful real estate agent who had married Cassandra, then calling herself Cassie, after a whirlwind romance. Husband number 2, David Chun, age 38, died in a house fire in Portland, Oregon, 3 years ago, Patricia continued. This one was ruled arson, but they never found the perpetrator. David was a successful accountant, life insurance policy worth $800,000. And both times, Cassie was the sole beneficiary, Ted observed. Not just the beneficiary, the survivor. Both times she barely escaped with her life. Both times she was hailed as a tragic widow who'd lost everything. Patricia pulled out another file. But here's where it gets interesting. After David Chun's death, Cassie disappeared for 6 months. She resurfaced in Nevada with a new identity. Dr. Cassandra Hartwell. Fake medical degree, fake credentials, the whole 9 yards. How did she get a job at the hospital? She's smart, I'll give her that. She studied real medical textbooks, memorized procedures, and she had help. Dr. Trevor Blackstone helped her create her false identity. He'd been running a side business selling fake medical credentials to desperate wannabe doctors. Cassie was his masterpiece. Ted felt the pieces clicking into place. So Blackstone was already dirty when he met her? Dirty doesn't begin to cover it, Patricia said. Trevor Blackstone has been involved in medical fraud, malpractice cover-ups, and identity theft for years. He's the one who helped Cassie create her new life. And in return, She became his partner in crime. What about the third husband? Billy mentioned 3 previous husbands. Patricia smiled grimly. That's where your client gets interesting. Billy Thornton isn't husband number 3. He's husband number 4. There was another one between David Chun and Billy. She pulled out a final file. Michael Torres, age 41, died in a house fire in Reno, Nevada, 2 years ago. This one was ruled suspicious, but the case went cold when the primary witness, a neighbor who saw someone running from the house, died in a car accident a week later. Another convenient death, Ted observed. But here's the thing about Michael Torres, Patricia continued. He didn't die in that fire. He escaped, just like Cassie always does, but he didn't go to the police. He went underground, and he's been hunting Cassie ever since. Ted looked up sharply. He's alive? Very much alive, and he's been tracking Cassie's movements for 2 years. He's the one who's been sending anonymous tips to the authorities. He's the one who led me to the truth about Cassie's past. Where is he now? Here in Millbrook. He's been watching the trial, waiting for his chance to testify. He has evidence that could blow this case wide open. Ted felt a surge of hope. What kind of evidence? Recordings, photos, documents. Michael Torres has been building a case against Cassie for 2 years. He has proof that she's killed at least 3 men, maybe more. He has evidence of her insurance fraud, her identity theft, and her partnership with Trevor Blackstone. Why hasn't he gone to the police? Patricia's expression darkened. Because he's not entirely clean himself. Michael Torres has a past. A dark past. He's been involved in some questionable activities, and he knows that if he comes forward, he'll be opening himself up to prosecution. But he's reached a point where he doesn't care anymore. He wants justice for the men Cassie has killed. Ted gathered the files. I need to meet with him. Already arranged, Patricia said. He'll be at the courthouse tomorrow. He's ready to testify. Meanwhile, in his jail cell, Billy was having his own revelation. A new inmate had been brought in, a man named Carlos Vega, who'd been arrested for armed robbery. Carlos recognized Billy from the news, but more importantly, he recognized Cassie. That woman on TV, Carlos said during rec time, the one crying about her husband. I know her. Billy looked up from his book. You know my wife? I know her from Vegas. She was working with this doctor, running some kind of medical scam. They were selling fake prescriptions, forged medical records, stuff like that. She went by a different name then. Crystal something. Billy felt his pulse quicken. Another piece of the puzzle. This doctor, Billy said carefully. Tall guy, dark hair, expensive suits. That's him. Trevor something. They had a good thing going until some guy started asking questions. Big guy. Looked like he could handle himself. Word was he was hunting them. They got spooked and split up. Billy smiled. Michael Torres, the third husband who hadn't died in the fire. Carlos, Billy said, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to get a message to my lawyer. The courtroom was packed as Ted Grayson prepared to present his defense. The prosecution had spent 2 weeks painting Billy as a cold-blooded killer who'd murdered his parents for insurance money. The evidence seemed overwhelming: accelerant residue, disabled smoke detectors, and a grieving widow who'd barely escaped with her life. But Ted had a surprise. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Ted began, the prosecution wants you to believe that Billy Thornton is a monster. They want you to believe that he killed his own parents for money. But the truth is far more complex and far more disturbing. He turned to face the courtroom, his eyes finding Cassie in the gallery. She sat in the front row, dressed in black, playing the grieving widow to perfection. The truth is that Billy Thornton is not the killer in this case. He's the intended victim, and the real killer is sitting right here in this courtroom. A murmur ran through the crowd. Cassie's face remained composed, but Billy could see the slight tightening around her eyes. "Your Honor," Ted continued, "I'd like to call my first witness, Mr. Michael Torres." The courtroom erupted in whispers as a tall, weathered man walked to the witness stand. Cassie's face went white, but she quickly composed herself. "Mr. Torres," Ted began, "please tell the court your relationship to the defendant." "I don't have a relationship with Billy Thornton," Michael said, his voice steady. "But I have a very personal relationship with his wife, Cassie. You see, Cassie was married to me before she married Billy. I'm husband number 3. The courtroom exploded in noise. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly. "Order. Order in the court." Ted waited for silence before continuing. "Mr. Torres, the court records show that you died in a house fire in Reno, Nevada, 2 years ago." "That's what Cassie wanted everyone to believe," Michael said. "She set that fire, just like she set the fire that killed Billy's parents. But I survived, and I've been hunting her ever since." Michael's testimony was devastating. He described in detail how Cassie had murdered her previous husbands, how she'd faked her own medical credentials, and how she'd partnered with Trevor Blackstone to create new identities and defraud insurance companies. "She's a serial killer," he concluded. "She's killed at least 4 men that I know of, and she would have killed Billy too if her plan had worked." The prosecution tried to discredit Michael, painting him as a desperate man seeking revenge. But Ted had more witnesses. Ted called Dr. Patricia Wells to the stand. Patricia presented her evidence methodically: the false identities, the insurance fraud, the pattern of house fires. Then came the bombshell. "Your Honor, I have security footage from the night of the fire at the Thornton residence." The courtroom watched in stunned silence as the hidden cameras revealed the truth. They saw Cassie moving through the house, spreading accelerant, setting fires. They saw her disable the smoke detectors and plant evidence to frame Billy. But the most damning evidence was yet to come. I also have recordings of conversations between Cassie Thornton and Dr. Trevor Blackstone, recorded in the weeks leading up to the fire. The jury listened in horror as Cassie and Trevor discussed their plan to kill Billy and his parents, to stage the fire, and to split the insurance money. $2 million, Cassie's voice crackled through the speakers. "It's enough to disappear forever, somewhere warm, somewhere they'll never find us." "What about the old folks?" Trevor's voice asked. "Collateral damage," Cassie replied coldly. "They're old anyway. We're doing them a favor." The courtroom was silent as the recording ended. Several jurors looked sick. Ted's final witness was the surprise of the day. "Your Honor, I call Billy Thornton to the stand." Billy walked to the witness stand with the confidence of a man who'd been waiting for this moment. He looked directly at Cassie as he was sworn in. "Mr. Thornton," Ted began, "did you kill your parents?" "No, I did not." "Did you set the fire that destroyed your home?" "No, I did not." "Did you disable the smoke detectors?" "No, I did not." Ted paused dramatically. "Mr. Thornton, did you know about your wife's plan to kill you?" Billy's eyes never left Cassie's face. "Yes, I did." "Mr. Thornton, if you knew about the plan, why didn't you go to the police?" Billy smiled, the same cold smile that had terrified his enemies in Detroit. "Because I wanted to catch her in the act. I wanted to make sure she couldn't hurt anyone else, and I wanted to make sure she paid for what she'd done to those other men." "So, you set a trap?" "I set a trap," Billy confirmed. I knew she was planning to kill me and my parents, so I prepared. I fireproofed parts of the house. I installed hidden cameras. I created a safe room where my parents and I could wait for the fire department. I let her think she was in control, but I was always one step ahead. Ted nodded. And your parents? Are they really dead? Billy's smile widened. My parents are very much alive. They're in protective custody, waiting to testify against the woman who tried to murder them. The courtroom erupted in chaos as Cassie jumped to her feet, screaming, "You set me up! You planned this whole thing!" The bailiff moved to restrain her as she continued screaming. "You're just like the others. You think you're so smart. Well, you're not. I killed them all, and I would have killed you too." The jury had heard enough. They convicted Cassie on all charges. The sentencing hearing was a media circus. Cassie had been convicted on multiple counts of murder, attempted murder, insurance fraud, and identity theft. The prosecution was seeking the death penalty, but Billy wasn't satisfied with a legal victory. He wanted something more personal. 3 days before the sentencing, Billy received a visitor in his jail cell, a man he hadn't seen in 15 years. Vincent Torino, the son of his former boss in Detroit. "Billy boy," Vincent said, settling into the visitor's chair. "You've been making headlines." "Vinny," Billy replied. "Didn't expect to see you here. Your wife's case has been all over the news. My father's been following it. He's impressed." Billy raised an eyebrow. "Impressed? You played it perfect. Set up your enemy, gathered evidence, let them hang themselves. It's art." "What does your father want, Vinny?" Vincent smiled. "He wants to offer you a job, the old job. You come back to Detroit, work for the family again. This time as a partner, not just muscle." Billy considered the offer. After everything he'd been through, the idea of returning to his old life had a certain appeal. But he had unfinished business in Millbrook. "Thanks, but no thanks," Billy said. "I've got my own plans." "Your funeral," Vincent said, standing to leave. "But if you change your mind, you know where to find us." After Vincent left, Billy received another visitor, Ted Grayson. "The jury's back," Ted said. "They've reached a verdict on the sentencing. And life without parole. She'll die in prison." Billy nodded, but he wasn't satisfied. Legal justice was one thing, but true justice was another matter entirely. That night, Billy was released from jail. All charges dropped. The real evidence had exonerated him completely. As he walked out of the courthouse, reporters surrounded him, shouting questions. "Mr. Thornton, how does it feel to be free? Mr. Thornton, will you be seeking damages from your wife? Mr. Thornton, what's next for you?" Billy ignored them all. He had work to do. His first stop was the county hospital where Dr. Trevor Blackstone was still working, apparently believing he'd avoided prosecution. Billy found him in his office, packing boxes. "Going somewhere, Trevor?" Billy asked, closing the door behind him. Trevor looked up, startled. "Billy, I heard you were released. Congratulations." "Thanks. I hear you're leaving town." "Yes. Well, after everything that's happened, I thought it would be best to make a fresh start." Billy moved closer. "That's funny. I was thinking the same thing. A fresh start. But first, I need to tie up some loose ends." Trevor tried to back away, but Billy was faster. The skills he'd learned in Detroit hadn't faded. In 30 seconds, Trevor was unconscious, and Billy was dragging him toward the service elevator. 3 hours later, Trevor Blackstone was found in his car at the bottom of Miller's Creek, the victim of an apparent accident. The police ruled it a suicide, a man overwhelmed by guilt over his involvement in a murder conspiracy. Billy's second stop was the state prison where Cassie was being held. He didn't visit her. He didn't need to. Instead, he had a conversation with Maria Santos, the actress who'd played Linda Morrison in The Cemetery. "You did good work," he told her, handing her an envelope filled with cash. "Now I need you to do one more thing." Maria nodded, understanding. She'd grown up in the system, and she knew how prison worked. She knew people on the inside, people who could arrange accidents. "How do you want it done?" she asked. "I don't care," Billy said. "Just make sure it looks natural, and make sure she knows it's coming." 2 weeks later, Cassandra Thornton was found dead in her cell, the victim of an apparent heart attack. The prison doctor ruled it natural causes. Stress and guilt, he said, had taken their toll. But Billy knew better. He'd used his connections to ensure that Cassie's final days were filled with terror, knowing that death was coming, but not knowing when or how. With Cassie and Trevor dead, Billy turned his attention to the others who had betrayed him. The list was short, but significant. First was Detective Ray Morrison, who had been too eager to arrest Billy, too willing to believe Cassie's lies without conducting a proper investigation. Billy had discovered that Morrison had gambling debts and had been taking bribes from local criminals to look the other way. Billy didn't kill Morrison. That would have been too obvious. Instead, he arranged for Morrison's gambling debts to be called in all at once by some very unpleasant people. Morrison lost his house, his car, and his pension trying to pay them back. Billy watched carefully as Morrison's life unraveled, ensuring that justice, his kind of justice, was served. He ended up working as a night security guard at a shopping mall, disgraced and broken. Detective Janet Cole was more difficult. She was honest, but she had been Morrison's partner and had gone along with the rushed investigation. Billy couldn't justify harming her, but he could make her life difficult. He arranged for her husband's construction company to lose several major contracts, forcing the family into financial hardship. It wasn't death, but it was still a form of justice. The media had painted Billy as a monster, so he decided to give them what they wanted. He held a press conference, standing in front of the burned remains of his house. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I want to thank you for your interest in my story. For months, you've portrayed me as a killer, a man who would murder his own parents for money. You were wrong." He paused, letting the words sink in. "But you weren't entirely wrong. I am a killer, just not the kind you thought." The reporters leaned forward, sensing a story. "I killed in self-defense. I killed to protect my family, and I killed to get justice for the men my wife murdered. In Detroit, they call me the Ghost. I thought I'd left that life behind, but sometimes the past catches up with you." The reporters were scribbling furiously, but Billy wasn't done. "To anyone who might be thinking of crossing me, of betraying me, of hurting the people I care about, I want you to understand something. I am not a forgiving man. I don't forget, and I don't leave loose ends." He turned and walked away, leaving the reporters shouting questions behind him. The story made national headlines. Billy Thornton, the mild-mannered contractor, was revealed to be a former enforcer for the Detroit mob. The story was sensational, but it served Billy's purposes. It sent a message to anyone who might be considering crossing him in the future. Marcus Rodriguez, his loyal foreman, had stood by him throughout the ordeal. Billy rewarded that loyalty by making Marcus a full partner in the construction company. Together, they expanded the business, using Billy's reputation and connections to secure larger contracts. "People respect strength," Billy told Marcus as they surveyed their latest project, a shopping center that would employ hundreds of local workers. They fear weakness. As long as they respect me, we'll do business. The moment they stop respecting me. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Marcus understood. Billy's parents, Eleanor and Frank, emerged from protective custody, healthy and proud of their son. They'd known about his past. They'd known all along. They'd also known about Cassie's true nature, but they'd kept quiet, trusting Billy to handle the situation. You did what you had to do, his father told him. Family comes first, always. Billy nodded, understanding the deeper meaning. Family was everything. Loyalty was everything. And betrayal was unforgivable. With that lesson burned into his soul, Billy Thornton prepared to rebuild not just a company, but a new legacy. One built on respect, fear, and an unwavering sense of justice. 5 years later, Billy Thornton stood on the balcony of his new home, a fortress-like mansion built on the hill overlooking Millbrook. The town had changed under his influence. He now controlled the construction industry, the real estate market, and through various shell companies, several other businesses. He'd never remarried. He'd learned his lesson about trust. His parents lived in a wing of the mansion, comfortable and protected. Marcus Rodriguez had become his right-hand man, and together they had built an empire that stretched across 3 states. The construction company had grown into a conglomerate with interests in real estate, manufacturing, and logistics. Billy employed over 2,000 people, and his word was law in Millbrook. But success had its price. Billy had discovered that his own children, from a brief relationship years earlier, had been in contact with Cassie before her death. They'd known about her plans and had chosen to remain silent, hoping to inherit Billy's fortune if the plan succeeded. The revelation had been devastating. His own blood had betrayed him. Billy had cut them out of his life completely. He'd changed his will, leaving everything to charity. He'd had them investigated, their activities monitored, their opportunities destroyed. They'd reached out to him over the years, trying to reconcile, but Billy was unmoved. Betrayal is betrayal, he told Marcus one evening, as they watched the sunset from the mansion's terrace. Blood doesn't change that. Marcus nodded. He'd learned not to question Billy's decisions. The man had built an empire through strength and ruthlessness, and those qualities extended to his personal life. What about the future? Marcus asked. What happens when you're gone? Billy smiled, but it wasn't the cold smile of his past. It was something warmer, more satisfied. I've been thinking about that. The business will go to you. The money will go to the people who've been loyal, the workers, the families who've stood by me. As for the rest, he shrugged. Let them fight over the scraps. That night, Billy received a phone call from Vincent Torino in Detroit. Billy boy, Vincent said, I heard about your business expansion. Impressive work. Thanks, Vinny. What can I do for you? Actually, I'm calling to do something for you. We found something you might be interested in. Billy raised an eyebrow. What kind of something? Records, documents. Seems your late wife had more secrets than you knew. More husbands, more murders. Goes back 15 years. Billy felt a familiar chill. Even in death, Cassie was still revealing her secrets. How many? He asked. 7 that we can confirm. Maybe more. She was a busy girl. Billy closed his eyes, thinking of all the families who'd never gotten justice. All the men who died believing they were loved. I want everything, he said. Names, dates, locations, everything. Figured you might. I'll have it to you by tomorrow. After hanging up, Billy walked to his study and opened a locked drawer. Inside were files and mementos, reminders of the life he'd lived, the enemies he'd beaten, the ghosts he'd survived. And as he prepared to review Cassie's final secrets, he understood that his vigilance could never truly end, not as long as betrayal and unfinished business lurked in the shadows. Inside was a single photograph, a picture of himself as a young man in Detroit, standing next to Vincent's father, Don Torino. He looked at the picture for a long time, remembering who he'd been, what he'd done, and why he'd left that life behind. But some things never changed. Justice was justice, and Billy Thornton was still very good at delivering it. The next morning, Billy began making calls. He had work to do. The ghost was back,